Well, tonight the presentation that I'm going to give is on the Battle of Pilot Knob. Pilot Knob happened on September 27th, 1864. And what the battle consisted of was General Price left Pocahontas, Arkansas, with approximately anywhere, depends on who you want to listen to, anywhere from 12 to 20,000 men. There are reports that a lot of his men, almost as many as 4,000, were unarmed, and so he had that many men. But you know, then there's also debate about that. But the key point that General Price wanted to do was he had with him the Confederate governor of Missouri. Does anybody remember his name?
Reynolds.
What's his first name? Thomas Reynolds. Yeah. Governor Thomas Reynolds was actually the elected governor by virtue of the death of the elected governor, Claiborne Jackson, who died in 1862. So therefore, he was really the legitimate governor of Missouri. So one of the goals of General Price was to bring Governor Thomas Reynolds, and to install him as the governor of Missouri, and to cause a lot of havoc. He had been promised by an organization called the Order of American Knights, or OAK, that if he come into Missouri, that 40,000 men would swarm to his banner. In other words, this is one of the things he was promised. So he finally got permission to come into Missouri, and he left Pocahontas on September the 19th, and he came into Missouri down around Donovan, Missouri. And they came up in 3 different columns. There was General Marmaduke John S. Marmaduke had a division. Then he was on the right flank. Then there was General Fagan, who came and he had the middle, and General Shelby had the left flank, General Joe Shelby. But there were some skirmishings, fighting pretty much from General Joe Shelby and his division amongst some of the troops that were eventually ended up at Fort Davidson. But what I have here is a battle map that was drawn quite a while after the battle. The person who drew this his name was Hinchy. He was not at the battle, but from eyewitness accounts, this is his sketch of what the battle looked like. And you'll notice the key points. He had the Lutheran church here. There's the fort. Here's Shepherd's Mountain. There's Pilot Knob. You know, just there's artillery right here. Confederate troops attacking here. And so he had the basics down because he lived in Ironton, or Arcadia area, and he knew the area. The reason of Fort Davidson was where it was located, and you'll notice that this is Shepherd's Mountain. It's within easy artillery range of the Fort Davidson. So this was actually surrounded by higher hills, or higher mountains. Fort Davidson was. And the reason that there was a fort there at all to begin with, because the railroad stopped at Pilot Knob. And that's why the fort was there. The fort was there primarily to act as a supply base, and also to be the headquarters for the 3rd Military District. And Fort Davidson was on the highest elevation in that little valley that it is in. Here are the commanders. These are the Confederate side. Now, everybody, when I say Confederate, everybody goes boo, okay? These are the Confederate side, boo. This is General Sterling Price. General Sterling Price at the time weighed around 350, some people say around 350 pounds. He was at this time of his life basically riding around in a carriage because he couldn't set a horse in. This is Thomas Ewing. Thomas Ewing was the author earlier in the war of Order Number 11, which evacuated the 5 counties up around the Kansas City area where people like Jesse James and all that were from. They were the primary commanders. General Ewing was the brother-in-law of General William Sherman, because General Sherman married Thomas Ewing's sister. The funny part was, or I always think the funny part, is that Ellen, who was General Sherman's wife, that's okay. Ellen and Thomas, her brother, father was named Thomas. He was a postmaster general. They raised General Sherman. So General Sherman was raised in the same household as his wife was. So it kind of worked out really good. There was like one of my, I don't know if you guys ever seen the movie Hondo, had John Wayne in it. And when he went to stop at that lady's house, and she said that her father had taken in her husband, he said that was convenient. And so I figured, I always think of that when I hear about General Ewing married the daughter of the man who raised him. That was pretty convenient. Anybody know who this guy is? That's General Cabell. Okay? He was a Confederate. He was in charge of one of Sterling Price's brigades. He was in Fagan's division. This is General Fagan. General Fagan was the division commander. This is General Marmaduke. Most people recognize General Marmaduke. General Marmaduke was in charge of a division. This here is General Joseph Scheel, or Joe Scheel. But that's pretty much what I call the key commanders in the Civil War, or at the Battle of Pilot Knob of the Confederate side. This is the Union side. Anybody know who this is? He's kind of unknown. He's just a captain. His name is Captain Franz Dinger, and he was a commander of Company E, 47th Missouri Infantry. This here is Colonel Thomas C. Fletcher. Colonel Fletcher was the future radical Republican governor of Missouri. And a lot of people, my impression is that a lot of people were not. I always think that the Confederate, one of the goals of General Price was to capture the fort, was he captured General Ewing and Colonel Fletcher. But then that's upon the basis that they knew they were there, so I'm not really sure they knew they were there. But can you imagine if he could have captured General Ewing, who was probably one of the most hated men on the western part of the state of Missouri, or if he could have captured the radical Republican governor of Missouri coming up to be, who was going to win the election in November. This here is Major James Wilson, and this is Captain William Campbell of the 14th Iowa. And these are the key officers of the, what I like to say are, they are the key officers, or the important officers that had the most effect upon the battle during the Battle of Pilot Knob. Like I said, Price's route came up and they ended up in Fredericktown, Missouri. Fredericktown was where they stopped. And here they had a discussion, and they came in there on the 25th of September. And that's when they had their discussion of, what are we going to do? General Price said, talk to his key commanders, General Shelby, General Marmaduke, General Fagan. General Fagan and General Marmaduke said, let's attack the fort. General Shelby, who has been compared to as probably the best cavalry commander, maybe west of that, in the Western Theater. Maybe not as good as General Forrest, but he's right up in that area. But he said, let's bypass it because there's nothing there we really need. But then you had to realize they had the ammunition, they had guns, and I think General Price thought that if he could capture the fort, it would be a positive influence upon pro-Southern, and maybe these 40,000 Oak members would come to his banner after he had this victory. So they decided that, because I guess a lot of people believe because General Shelby didn't really want to attack the fort, General Price sent General Shelby north. He stopped at Farmington enough to have like a little skirmish, or some of his men did, and then he headed up to Potosi and Mineral Point. His goal was to destroy as much railroad as he could to keep the reinforcements coming down from St. Louis. Because somehow the Confederates found out that General A.J. Smith was coming in from the south. And General A.J. Smith was one of the division commanders underneath General Sherman. His men were all veteran soldiers. And so they sent up here to destroy the railroad coming down from St. Louis to keep them from coming down and reinforcing General Erie. After he did enough damage that he felt was sufficient to stop the trains, General Shelby came south and was heading towards Fort Davis. October 26th, the Confederate Army left Fredericktown, and they came in through Shut-In Gap, and that's Highway 74. And if you drive through there, you can just see that gap. It's like amazing, just to me it was amazing that they made it through. But they come through the gap, and the first warning they had was by an outpost by the name of the Sergeant Atkinson. Sergeant Atkinson was one of the members of the 47th Missouri Infantry, and they had a 7-man outpost there, and it was on the Russell and the Fredericktown Road Junction, Russellville and the Fredericktown Road Junction, and so that's where they were set at, the 7-man post. And that was the first warning they had that the Confederates were actually in the area. So they attacked this force, and this is Colonel William Slemmon's brigade, come through here and ran into Ironton. This represents Ironton. When they got to Ironton, the outpost there on the Fredericktown Road had sent a couple guys back and said, warn the fort, the Confederates are here. They had no idea how many they were, but somehow the Union Army knew the Confederate force was heading in their direction. They had no idea. They even knew the date they left Pocahontas. So they had the spy system, but they had no idea exactly how many men there were and actually who was leading the force. So on the 26th, the very first was a little skirmish pretty much between some of Colonel William Slemmon's brigade, and they ended up attacking Company E, 47th Missouri. And by the time they attacked here, Major Wilson and his 3rd Missouri State Militia Cavalry and Company A, the 47th Missouri, were able to get there and reinforce them. One of the eyewitnesses to this was a guy in Company E. And here's what he said in what he had memoirs. He said that Company E, when this Azariah Martin warned him, who was one of the outpost picket men, warned him, said, you better head to the fort because there's a whole bunch of Confederates, the rebels, heading this way. So about 40 of them ran into the courthouse in Ironton. And they started out knocking out the windows and stuff. And the Confederates come in there. And one of the things this eyewitness said that this Union soldier from the 3rd Missouri State Militia Cavalry on his horse was heading back towards the fort. And his horse stumbled and he fell. And the horse fell. Well, here come this Confederate soldier on this, had a red shirt. He called him red shirt. And the Union soldier raised his hand to surrender, and the Confederate soldier shot him. This made all of Company E inside the Ironton courthouse, Iron County courthouse, mad. So they shot at him, and the horse and the red shirt kind of stumbled, but he stayed on his horse. The horse went off heading back towards the town of Ironton. And then finally, when the horse, they kept shooting at him. And finally, by the time the horse made a jump over a fence, the guy in the red shirt lost his balance and fell, but he was already dead, this guy said. So this guy said these were the first two casualties in the battle, or the Battle of Iowa Mountain. Well, once Major Wilson, and being reinforced by some of Company A, 47th Missouri Infantry, and this part of Company A, 47th Missouri Infantry was mounted. By the time they got to where they could into Ironton, then Slemmon's brigade, the members of Slemmon's brigade, retreated back to where the main force was. So they chased them over to here, and then they had another little skirmish here, and then Major Wilson went back to the Ironton, And then the Confederates decided they'd had enough, it was getting late. They went back to Shut-In's Gap. There's like a little valley right in here. And they went back there and they set up camps. So Major Wilson and his force set up a outpost. And they were watching to see what the Confederates were going to do. At this time, on the 26th of September, General Ewing arrived in the afternoon at Fort Davidson. He had been sent to Fort Davidson to, how do you say this, to take the supplies out of there, put them on a train, and take them back to St. Louis. General Ewing got there, and by the time he got there, all this stuff was already happening, and so he's going, he decided to stay around. And so it was at this time in the evening of the 26th that he came up to where Major Wilson was out, set it up there on the Russellville and Fredericktown Road. And he saw all the fires that the Confederates were putting up for the night, campfires. Then that was the time he decided he knew that it was more than just a little raid, that they were probably facing all of General Price's army. And this is on the evening of the 26th. On the morning of the 27th, real early in the morning, the Confederates got up, rode into Ironton. General Price's army is here. This is again Major Wilson. This is the test. This is the test. This is Fagan. Cabell. Who did I say this was? I didn't tell you, did I? No. This is Pinckney Powers. He's a captain of Company H, 47th Missouri. Again, this is William Campbell, captain of the 14th Iowa. And this is General Marmaduke. 14th Iowa is General Ewing said if it wasn't for the 14th Iowa Infantry and the 3rd Missouri State Militia Cavalry, that this battle would have been a disaster. But because the 14th, and there was only five companies of the 14th Missouri, 14th Iowa, they were a veteran organization. They had been at places like the Battle of Shiloh. They had been on the Red River campaign. Their time was up. They were actually heading home to Iowa, and they were stopped at St. Louis, and then they were, they decided to join in the fight. And so 5 companies of this regiment came with General Ewing by rail to St. Louis. Another important organization in this battle was Battery H, 2nd Missouri Light Artillery, under Captain Montgomery. They arrived on the 22nd of September, and they had like 3-inch rods and Missouri cannons. And they were light artillery, which means they were pulled by horses, and they could just follow the cavalry around, or they were a very mobile force. Their cannons were not stationary, and that's pretty much what it means by light artillery. So on the morning of September 27th, they come into Ironton, which is represented about right in here. Major Wilson and all the men that he had with him, which was part of the 14th Iowa, part of 47th Missouri, pretty much the infantry, and his 3rd Missouri State Militia Cavalry, and some of the members of the 2nd Missouri State Militia Cavalry. They met General Price's army in Ironton. So when they met General Price's army, this force the Union force was highly outnumbered. One figure said 3-1 by the Confederates. Actually, it was a whole lot more than that. But at this time of the battle, I'm not sure that's true. But General Cabell, and this is General Cabell here, General Cabell was the main attack. That's why I have him highlighted, because he just seemed to be always where the fighting was. This is General Marmaduke's division. Marmaduke's division went up on the around Shepherd Mountain, and they were trying to flank the Union troops. General Fagan's division went up around on the edge of Colonnade Mountain. But when they saw this happening, General Wilson's force split. Major Wilson and the 14th and his 3rd Missouri State Militia Cavalry went up here onto the edge of Colonnade Mountain and put up a fighting defense, as well as the 14th Iowa and parts of the 47th went on Shepherd Mountain and put up a defense. Where in the early morning hours, the fighting had stopped pretty much, and then all the Union troops went to the Fort Davidson, but they left some of the commanders went to see General Ewing, and General Ewing said, "I want pickets." Does anybody know what a picket is? Picket is an outpost. In other words, like a picket was pretty much a person that they would put out as an early warning system. Now, I still don't know why they called it picket. They called it picket. I always think of picket fence when I hear the word picket, but picket was somebody who they put out as an early warning. And picket was probably one of the most dangerous jobs because usually both sides had these pickets, and they would warn the army usually by firing. So a lot of times the opposite side or the enemy would try and capture them for pickets. But these were actually more like skirmishers. In other words, there was a larger force that they had out front as an early warning system. General Marmaduke's command was taken, his division, his brigade was, their job was to get on top of Shepherd Mountain. And they got on top of Shepherd Mountain. Fagan's division, their job was to get on top of Colonnade. And they achieved that. Now, how many of y'all ever been over to Fort Davis? Can you imagine climbing that mountain on the south side to get over onto the crest of the mountain in order to attack from the north side, to attack the north? And Shepherd Mountain probably is one of the people who I've talked to who have done metal detecting, said that Shepherd Mountain is probably one of the miserablest places there is because of the terrain, the boulders, the trees, and everything to do metal detecting. But it doesn't stop them. But they still do it. They just opened up a trail this fall or this spring. Shepherd Mountain is a 3.5 mile trail. Their description of the trail is rough. You know, you need to be an experienced hiker. About the first mile, maybe first quarter mile is not too bad. But after that, they say it's almost straight down and straight up. They say you need to be very experienced. It's not for old people like me, you know. And but it's a nice trail that goes right by where the Confederate cannons were set up. Now, there was a guy named Campbell who was in Wood's division, Wood's brigade, in Marmaduke's division, who said that they used 20, they hauled up 2 cannons on top of Shepherd Mountain. They used 20 mules per cannon to haul these cannons up Shepherd Mountain. Do that, you know, how did they put 20 mules together and haul them up that Shepherd Mountain to get to the top? Fort Davidson, if you'll look over there on that diorama, has 2 rifle pits. It has the North Rifle Pit and the South Rifle Pit. The South Rifle Pit was occupied by company members of Company H, 47th Missouri, and the North Rifle Pit was occupied by Company A, 47th Missouri. So around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, things began in earnest. General Clark, John B. Clark, his brigade, he had taken over Marmaduke's brigade as commander, and Marmaduke took the division. General Clark, his men decided to go down the side of the mountain. I'm going to put them in my notes now. This Confederate Campbell I was telling you about, one of the things he said in there I forgot to mention was that they were told before the battle that if they put up a strong demonstration that the men inside the fort would surrender. That's what they were told. Price's plan was that the battle take place a coordinated attack. And that means all these units on Pilot Knob, Shepherd Mountain, he sent around the base of Shepherd Mountain and they come in from the western side, and they were all supposed to attack at the same time. Now the Union say they had around, anyway, depends on who you read, but the Union had anywhere from 800 to 1,100 men. Even at the minimum, they were facing 8,000 men of General Price. That's at the minimum. That's going upon the 12,000 men, and then 4,000, probably around 2,000 men that was General Shelby had in his division. But at the minimum, they were facing 8,000 Confederate troops. And these were, as a whole, veteran troops. These Confederate troops were not, I mean, there were conscripts in there. You know what conscript is? Conscript during the Civil War was like if you're standing out in the middle of the field and the Confederate Army would come up to you and say, you have two choices. You can either join our army or you can die. And most people decided, you know, yeah, I'll join. And that was the conscript. But he did have conscripts. And the great thing about being a conscript, they were so worried about you running, a lot of times they would put you in the front. So, you know, if you were a conscript, you know, and that didn't always happen, but like during the battle time, sometimes they would do that. The General Clark's brigade was on top of Shepherd Mountain. And in his report, he states that they did not receive any fire whatsoever until they put up these two artillery pieces. And so then then the fort started firing that. This is what I wanted to get right. The sign for the attack was a cannon shot. That was the sign for the attack. In other words, General Price said, when you hear the first cannon shot, it's time to attack. And so when they heard the first cannon shot, General Clark's men started heading down Shepherd's Mountain. On his extreme left was General John Q. Burbridge. Next to him was Colonel William Jeffers, him and his brigade. Then Colonel Colton Green, then Colonel Robert Lawther, and then Colonel Wood, who was on the right flank. So these are all General Clark's brigade right in here. So they head down Shepherd Mountain. Now I described how Shepherd Mountain was, you know, rocky and hilly and steep. So these guys go down, I'm trying to cut it too short, but they come down this mountain, and it wasn't, during the Civil War they liked to attack in a straight line. When they come down this mountain, there was no organization. When they got down to the bottom of the mountain, they had to reorganize. And the whole time they started coming down this mountain, first you had some of the skirmishers from the Union troops on the mountain, and they fired a couple shots, and then they headed for the fort. But the first one to attack, when General Cabell heard his brigade, when he heard the cannon, his brigade went where Highway 21 is. They pretty much ran straight right through, and they attacked the fort. They got within 75 yards before they were beat back. Now you have to realize that there was cannons inside the fort. The Union troops had cannons inside the fort. They had the South Rifle Pit, where Company H of the 47th Missouri was, firing at them. And these cannons were shooting pieces of grape shot, canister. And these grape shot canister are like 2 pounds or less of solid steel. And there's like anywhere between 10 to 12 of these pieces of grape shot in each can. And they were shooting at them with 32-pound cannons, 24-pound cannons. In other words, the amount of the cannonballs were 24 pounds, the weight. Plus, they were getting all these bullets coming at them from the infantry firing at them. And this is the thing that always amazed me, because these Confederate troops charged this fort knowing, they were veteran soldiers, knowing that they were going to be shot at like this. So they got to within 75 yards of the first charge, and they had to retreat. Well, inside the fort, during this attack, and if you've ever been to Fort Davidson, imagine 800 to 1,100 men inside that fort, plus they had the powder magazine. The powder magazine took up maybe almost 1/5 of the interior of the fort. Plus they had some of the horses in there. They had 800 men. There's reports that these guys were standing inside the fort 3 deep. One guy was shooting, another guy was passing the rifles back and forth, and another guy was loading. So it was like facing repeaters. So these Confederate troops were not only just facing being outnumbered, they outnumbered the Union troops, but they were being constantly, there was no break. And so they retreated. And about the time they retreated, then General Clark's men finally got organized and charged. And when they charged, they met the same onslaught. And they retreated. And about the time they retreated, General Clark's men had been reorganized, and they charged again, and they attacked, and they had the same thing. And the whole thing was, by this time, General Fagan men, Colonel McCrae, this is Colonel McCrae, and Colonel Slimmons, they finally got down off of Powhatan Mountain, because they were being met by members of Company E and Company E 47th Missouri and members of the 3rd Missouri State Militia Cavalry. And by the time they got off that mountain, then they attacked. And so all these units are attacking at separate times, and there was no coordination like General Price wanted. But right in here is called the Iron Furnace. That's where Major Wilson was captured. Major Wilson was captured there, as was Captain Dinger. Remember I mentioned him earlier. While they attacked, and they were driven back, and they went back into around the creek area. And when they got driven back, then Colonel Freeman and Colonel Slayback's cavalry regiment finally made it around Shepherd's Mountain, and they attacked. And when they attacked, Company A of the 47th Missouri in this North Rifle Pit counterattacked and drove them away. And parts of Company H, Captain Milks' 3rd Missouri State Militia Cavalry also. And they drove Slayback and Freeman back. And this is Alonzo Slayback. And they drove them back. And so all this was going on. It was just utter, almost non-stop firing. And all this was going on. Then General Capel's brigade reorganized, and they attacked again. This time, they got up to the pit, or the ditch, or the moat, or whatever you want to call it, around the fort. And that's when the farthest they got, and then they retreated once they realized there was no support. Because General Clark, some of his officers said, we saw Cabell attack again, and we were getting ready to go to their support. And this was Colonel Jeffers, who was part of Colonel Clark's men. He said Cabell came running back, so we figured it was useless. So the rest of the day, the firing was pretty much people shooting from hidden positions to sharpshooters, like on Shepherd's Mountain. And Shepherd's Mountain is within rifle range and artillery, but they were receiving fire from sharpshooters. Well, Company H, the 47th Missouri, if you remember, had been in the South Rifle Pit. So this Sergeant Wilkinson was in the South Rifle Pit, along with this Captain Powers, who I pointed out earlier. And he said, "Sir, I think we need to get out of here," because they were receiving rifle fire, and Captain Powers said, "Well, we haven't got permission to get out of here." He's going, "Sir, I think we need to get out of here." So finally, Cap Power sent somebody inside the fort to ask General Ewing if they could come inside the fort. And General Ewing said, yeah, come on in. So then they abandoned the south right. And they went through a thing called the Sally Port. If you go to the fort, it's no longer there. The Sally Port was kind of like one person at a time could go through it. So they did all this skirmishing, pretty much just sharpshooting and firing. There was no more any more major attacks the rest of the day. And then darkness came in. But General Price hadn't given up. When darkness started coming in, he started moving his troops around the fort. The men inside the fort, when they looked outside, they could see all these campfires around. So they know they're getting surrounded. And General Price had his men building ladders in order to scale the walls for the next day attack. That's what they were doing. So the men inside the troop, General Ewing had a staff meeting officers and said, what should we do? We have three options. We can either surrender, we can go ahead and fight till we run out of ammunition. We probably have enough ammunition for another little battle, then surrender, or we can retreat. And one of the things that General Ewing was a little bit worried about, because they had 100 civilians that had joined in the battle inside the fort on the Union side. They had over 100 civilians. Some of them were black volunteers, and the black volunteers helped man the cannons. In his report, he said he did not want to have another Fort Pillow. And that's exactly what he said. And so he was concerned about the black troops. Well, finally they decided the best thing to do is to retreat. Get out of the fort, abandon the fort, blow it up, and then retreat. To me, this was like, I mean, I just think it took a lot of guts to do that, make that decision, because once you get outside the safety of the fort walls, you're at the mercy of the Confederates. I mean, granted, it was around midnight, 1 o'clock when they left. So they wrapped all the cavalry hoods, mostly the wagons on the wheels of the artillery pieces they were taking with them, and they went across the drawbridge. The drawbridge was a wooden drawbridge that they could raise. It's like through sand and dirt and stuff on top of the drawbridge, plus they wrapped all these blankets and sacks and stuff. And then the infantry went out through, and they were led by Colonel Fletcher. The infantry went out through the Sally Port, went around the fort wall, and went out the north rifle pit and came up on the outside of the fort. There actually was like a church, Methodist church up there in that area. And they come up behind that. And the reason they said they had to do all that is because they had like a pile of wood for the charcoal for the iron furnace, and it was on fire. And one of the guys who was there said it lit it up like it was daylight. And I'm looking at it like, here's the fort, here's the iron furnace. That has to be a heck of a fire. But so I guess sometimes if you're worried about getting out of there, it can't be dark enough. But General Ewing was able to retreat up what was called the Caledonia-Potosi Road, come against the current. He was stopped by one of Colonel Dobbins, or his advance guide he had was stopped by one of the reports said that he was stopped by Colonel Dobbins' outpost or his picket, and the conversation went something like this, according to the guy that wrote this memoir. He said, "Halt, who goes there?" And this Union soldier said, "Troops on the move." Colonel Dobbins' men were from Arkansas, and so some people in Missouri talk about it. And the Confederate troops had been moving all night, and so they said the picket let them go. So General Ewing's 800 men to 1,100 men plus his artillery was on this Caledonia-Potosi Road, and they said that the fires of the Confederates were as only like 50 yards away. So to me, it's one of the greatest strategies he had in order to march past this and not be attacked. We left a small force behind him to blow up the powder magazine because he did not want this to fall into the hands of the Confederates. So these guys used the gunpowder and made a trail. And one of the funniest things, now I don't know if this is true or not, there was this, and I can't think of his name now, there was this black guy. He actually was a teamster for the 1st Wisconsin Cavalry. And they left him there. So he was a volunteer, one of the volunteer fighters. But he said he had been so tired, Willis was his name. Anyway, was his last name. I think Willis was his last name. He goes, I was so tired that I went to sleep. Well, these Union troops that were going to blow up the cannon to keep the Union troops from falling, the dead Union soldiers, which they think was around 10 to 12, they threw them and all this material that they, cannons and caissons and stuff for the cannons on this powder magazine. But their primary concern was to place the dead Union soldiers upon this powder magazine, which was an earthen structure. And when they blow it up, they would cover up the bodies, and then the hogs couldn't get to them, and plus the Confederates couldn't get their uniforms. Well, I don't even know where I'm doing. They blew up this fort. This Willis said, I flew maybe half a mile in the air and a quarter mile away, landed up, and he said, me and another guy, and we took off running. And I'm just going, they thought he was dead because we were so tired, we were asleep. I read that memoir, and I'm just going, man, it's just hard to believe. But anyway, when they blew it up, General Price's men were so excited because they just knew that an accident had happened and that the fort had blown up, the powder magazine had blown up. In the morning when they go in there, that all these guys were going to still be in shock, the ones that were still alive, and they would just go in there and capture all these Union soldiers in that part of their battle was over. But they were wrong because there was no Union troops in there. And the only ones left in there were the dead. But this is remnants of the garrison flag that flew over the fort. These remnants can be found at the Iron County Historical Society. A few years ago, if you ever go in there and look at it, a few years ago there were some Confederate reenactors saying, well, no, this is the Confederate battle flag. But it's really not. Because if you look at it, you look at the stars, anyway, the stripes doesn't correspond to the Confederate battle flag, or does the stars. And if you look at the stars, a lady named Pat Hagler, who's a member of the Friends of Fort Davidson, she measured the stars and the stripes and made a replica flag, and I forgot the dimensions. It's like 20 by 30, something like that. It's just, it takes up like the whole wall. It's hanging at Fort Davidson Museum. And she said you can measure the stars and the stripes, and that will tell you the size of the flag. Because during the Civil War, there was no standard garrison flag. They were all different. So anyway, there's no Confederate that's going to carry a flag this big that corresponds with this. General Ewing, sister, and if you go to what's the name of that college? Notre Dame. General Sherman's papers are there. In there you'll find a letter where Ellen had written a letter to William Sherman. Remember Thomas Ewing's her brother? She said, I hear Tom's in a tight spot in Missouri. And I'm thinking, he definitely was in a tight spot. And he's completely surrounded, made his way up. And the thing that just amazes me so much, you hear about the escape of the Confederates or the Union troops underneath Schofield in Spring Hill, Tennessee, and which accumulated in the Battle of Franklin, and then into the Battle of Nashville. You hear how great that was. This retreat by General Ewing was made a month prior to that. You don't hear anything about it because it wasn't fight. It was. And that is pretty much my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Do you all have any questions?
Have you talked at all with Scott House lately?
Not lately. I know he has got he did a reprint of what, Thunder in Arcadia Valley or something like that.
I talked to him 2 or 3 months ago at the Cape Civil War Roundtable, and he's pretty excited about that. You know, that he's got a book coming out probably next month or the following month.
I think he's planning on having it at Fort Davidson at the reenactment.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I want to say. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But on September 27th, 28th is the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Fort Davidson, or Battle of Highland Hop. And it's actually takes place on the 150th anniversary of the battle. This is one of the few battles that they actually reenact on the actual site. And there'll be cannons inside the fort. If you get a chance to go there, these are kind of the schedule of events. On Saturday, the reenactment, the running battle starts at 1 p.m. It's pretty much, they run from like Ironton, you know, Shepherd Mountain, out in our area. The main battle starts at 1:30 p.m. They actually reenact the blowing up the fort at 8:30 p.m. I'm going to tell you right now that if you leave here at 11 o'clock, you go there by 12 o'clock to get a good spot by 1:30, you're going to be about 2 hours too late. Because right now, you have to get there pretty much at least a couple hours before the battle starts just to get a decent spot. Because they are figuring on, they're figuring on around, right now they're figuring on around 1,400 reenactors. And the most they've ever had before the time was around 700, maybe 800 is the most. They don't really think so. So they're actually figuring on 1,400, maybe as much as 1,800. I work over there periodically. I'll be working over there on the 27th. But I was working over there one day in March, this past March. Some guy came up from Kentucky. Of course, I'm not real bright sometimes. He said, "I'm with the 3rd Kentucky Cavalry." I go, "All right, man, Union." He goes, "We're coming." I go, "What do you mean you're coming?" "We're coming." And then I got a friend who lives up in Warrensburg that belongs to the Missouri Confederate Brigade. They're reenactors. He said there's over 450 just in his brigade. Yeah, it's just incredible. And I actually heard of somebody from New York reenactors coming in. So reenactors, and I might be wrong, but reenactors like to reenact on the property, but to do it on the exact same day 150 years later is kind of a rare thing. I'm sorry about what I didn't mean that.
That's okay. Scott talked to me a lot longer than I needed to listen because he's so excited about the book coming out. I was getting lost in what he's kind of an expert, studying it and everything. But he was, one of the things I remember he talked about was these scaling ladders. He said they never really did use them. Now, you acted like they didn't start making them until they were going to use them the next day.
They were going to use them on that. Yeah.
But I think there are some accounts that talk, or at least some authors' ideas that they tried to use scaling ladders, but I don't think they ever did.
No, they never did.
And then he was telling me how they were shooting at these cannon that were on Shepherd's Mountain, that they were shooting at them from the fort, trying to knock them out. And he said that previously, and maybe they knew this even back, the 1st of September or whatever, that in the artillery when they were practicing, they would have stakes driven out in parts of the field out there, and on Shepherd's Mountain they'd have a stake with a flag or something on it, and they were judging their distance, how far, how much load or whatever, what elevation and everything they have to do to hit these various points. And that kind of explains why they were fairly accurate in knocking out those cannon that were on the mountains, because weren't they planning on shooting down?
Yes, they were on the military crest of the side of the mountain, which means they were not on top of the mountain, but they were on where the mountain was actually trying to hide their position. But one of the reasons was because Colonel, and I didn't mention his name, but Colonel David Murphy, who later became colonel, he was actually a first lieutenant at the time. He was an artillery officer, and he was with the 1st Missouri Artillery, and he had a lot of experience. And so one of the accounts said that the cannon shot that knocked the cannon out said that Colonel Murphy eyed at the piece, aimed at that artillery piece, and then the first shot knocked it down. And that's, one of those accounts, And Colonel Murphy, when he was lieutenant, he was an adjutant for the 47th Missouri Infantry Regiment. He actually got up on the wall, and there's several memoirs that said that he got up on the wall and was just, how do you say it, gesticulating or yelling at the Confederates. And General Ewing said, get down off that wall, and his men were begging him to come off the wall. And if you ever go and listen to that video there, you'll hear this. There's no better place, no prettier place to die than right here. And so that was his response. And and the Union troops said that the Confederates were shooting at him, trying to kill him, and they don't know how many Confederate sharpshooters shot him. And even the Confederate, I read one Confederate memoir, and the guy said, "We did our best to kill that idiot. We never hit him." So, anybody else have any questions?
What happened to the train that brought Ewing down from St. Louis?
He went back. Yeah. See, General Ewing actually was under orders to go back, but then once he got there, he figured it was too late. And General Ewing sent the train back. So it was, they sent back. There's some like Iron County papers and stuff like that. They were loading all that stuff, and a lot of the civilians who wanted to get out of there left on the train. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Cape Girardeau has a group called the Civil War Roundtable. We meet the 3rd Sunday of every month at 2 o'clock at Hanover Lutheran Church, which is on Perryville Road, out close to the golf course. Sunday, Scott House is going to be talking about his new book on Fort Davis at 2 o'clock in Hanover Lutheran Church. You're all welcome.
Thank you.
The blacks that were living in the town that helped man the cannons, were they recruited? Were they conscripts, or
No, they just kind of went there under their own free will.
And also, you said they didn't want to repeat of Fort Pillow. What was that?
Fort Pillow? Fort Pillow was where General Nathan Duffy's force attacked Fort Pillow, captured it, and different reports was anyway, if you read the northern side of it, the Confederate troops killed all the black troops because they were black troops, and they killed them because they were firing them.
So they would have definitely wanted to get out of town.
Yeah, and one of the things like the Luther, like a lot of buildings in Ironton and Arcadia and Colorado were used as hospitals after the battle. And one of the things is if you go into the Lutheran church, if you ever do the tours, I think it'll probably be open during the battle reenactment. They got a place where this one was called Captain Jim, who was the black man in charge of all the black soldiers, volunteers. He had been wounded, so they took him in there. And so when the Confederates came in after the battle to look for key people that they wanted to get rid of, these people that were taking care of this captain raised the trap door and slid him underneath there to keep him from being taken out and killed. You never hear this too much, but the women that fought as men in the Civil War, there is a report that a Southern soldier was actually a woman, and she's buried in there. They know her name.
How many casualties was there in our battle?
The Confederates suffered around 1,500 casualties. Around 500 of them were killed. The Union troops, at best, they estimate around 50. Probably around 15 to 20 were killed. Just The Fort David, the Battle of Pilot Knob was how do you say this? A delaying action which allowed the Union forces to bring in just so many reinforcements that when General Price, one of his goals was to take St. Louis, he bypassed St. Louis. And by the time he got to Jefferson City, there were so many Union troops there, he bypassed Jefferson City. Ended up at Mine Creek where I think I read one time when he got back to Arkansas, Indian Territory, when he started out with around, some people say around 20,000 men. By the time he got to Arkansas, he had like 4,000. Because they just started deserting, it's like just running.
Where did he go after Fort Davidson?
Fort Davidson, he headed towards I go back to that one thing I was going to go back to it. In the slide. General Price went up towards St. Louis, but ended up going over towards St. Clair, then Union, Missouri, and Washington, Missouri, pretty much followed the Missouri River up towards Jefferson City. General Marmaduke, General Price was with General Fagan. General Marmaduke left Fort Davidson. General Shelby left Mineral Point. General Shelby and Marmaduke met at Caledonia, but they were a little bit behind the Union troops. The Union troops then turned left on Webster Road and they were heading towards Rolla. They ended up in Leesburg, Missouri. And so Marmaduke and Shelby followed them. And if you ever drive on Highway 8 outside of Potosi going towards Steelville, when you get up on that, you go through Berryman, start going up this ridge. On that ridge, that's part of the retreat route that Ewing had. Now, this is kind of a remake of a book I had done. I made it look more like a book. It's about the retreat. It's called 66 Miles in 39 Hours. So if you're interested in one, just come up and talk to me later. But the retreat was 66 miles from Fort Davidson to Leesburg. And the reason we know that is because Captain Montgomery, on the wheels of the artillery piece, they had a kilometer. And that's how they know how far they went. In 39 hours. So can you imagine going 66 miles in 39 hours? It doesn't sound like a lot, but they had been fighting, they were marching in the dark, they were marching in the rain, and they ended up being chased. They ended up, like I talked about that, they called it the 8 Mile Ridge. When we got up into there, they were being chased. They had like at least, one of the reports said there was at least 4 to 6 different skirmishes there. And then the battle, Huzzall Valley. And then they had the battle outside of Leesburg, and then they were held in Leesburg for quite about 2 years. But if you're interested in it, just come on up and talk to me. If not, come on up and talk to me anyway. I'll answer any questions. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I've read that General Price was a real heavy set man, and that he drove around in a buggy, so heavy he couldn't hardly ride a horse.
You're correct. I mentioned it, I think, a little bit before you got here. Estimates was that he weighed around 350 pounds. Couldn't even get up on a horse anymore. I know I was getting close to 300 pounds one time, and I got up on the horse and heard the horse run.
Wasn't Price a governor or a candidate? Or?
He was governor prior to the Civil War. Anybody else got any questions or statements? Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Channels 7 and 98 TV and web broadcasting are made possible through contributions and donations from viewers like you. Thank you for your support.